My name is Samantha Mitchell, 38 years old, and I worked 15 grueling years to afford my $2 million Malibu beach house. It was my sanctuary until my phone rang last month. It was Dad, casually informing me that my estranged sister Amber would be moving into my beach house. Without consulting me, he'd promised her my home. When she arrived the next day with her husband, 3 wild children, 2 untrained dogs, and mountains of luggage, I knew my peaceful paradise was about to become a battlefield. Before I dive into this nightmare, where are you watching from? Drop a like and subscribe if you've ever had family members who felt entitled to your hard-earned possessions. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I handled this home invasion, disguised as family, helping family. To understand this betrayal, you need to know where I came from and how I got here. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in Columbus, Ohio, with parents who worked steady middle-class jobs. Dad was an insurance adjuster, Mom taught 3rd grade, and we never went hungry, but luxury was definitely not in our vocabulary. Our family dynamic shifted dramatically when my sister Amber was born when I was 4. From the moment she arrived, with her golden curls and captivating blue eyes, she became the center of my parents' universe. While I was the responsible, studious child who followed rules and maintained straight, as Amber was the spirited, charismatic one who could charm her way out of any trouble. The favoritism wasn't subtle. For my 16th birthday, I received a used SAT prep book and a $50 savings bond. For Amber's sweet 16, my parents threw her a massive party, complete with a hired DJ and a designer dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe. When I was accepted to Ohio State with a partial scholarship, my parents congratulated me, but explained they couldn't contribute to my tuition because they were saving for both daughters' futures. 2 years later, they bought Amber a car when she started community college, which she dropped out of after 1 semester. This pattern continued into adulthood. Amber bounced between jobs, burning through money faster than she earned it. She launched a boutique that failed within 6 months. Then came her photography studio that never booked a paying client. Next was her event planning business that resulted in 1 disastrous wedding and a lawsuit. After each failure, my parents would bail her out, emptying their retirement accounts to cover her debts while telling me, "Your sister just hasn't found her passion yet." Meanwhile, I left home at 18 with $327 to my name. I worked 2 jobs while earning my computer science degree, surviving on ramen and determination. After graduation, I joined a tech startup, working 80-hour weeks, climbing from junior developer to team leader to executive. When the company went public, my stock options finally gave me the financial freedom I'd fought for. Through these years, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Holiday calls and occasional visits were enough to keep the peace, but I kept my success private. I didn't share details about my promotions or investments. When Mom died of cancer 2 years ago, I returned home for the funeral and found Dad lost and alone. Despite our complicated history, I felt sorry for him. We started speaking more regularly, and when he expressed interest in seeing where I lived, I finally invited him to visit. 6 months ago, I purchased my dream home, a modern 3-bedroom beach house in Malibu, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. The $2 million property represented everything I'd worked for: independence, security, and peace. When Dad visited last month, he seemed genuinely impressed. He wandered through the house, commenting on the fancy kitchen gadgets and the hotel-style bathrooms. He spent hours sitting on my deck, watching the waves crash against the shore. Not once during his 5-day stay did he mention that Amber needed a place to live or that he was considering my home as a solution to her problems. That's what made his phone call, just 2 weeks after his visit, so shocking. "Samantha," he said, his voice casual as if discussing the weather, "I told Amber she could stay at your beach house for a while. She's having a rough time, and you have all that extra space." When I asked for details, he was vague. "Just until they get back on their feet. They're having some financial difficulties, and their landlord wasn't understanding." By they, I assumed he meant Amber and her husband Derek, whom I'd met only twice. What I didn't know then was that they actually referred to a much larger invasion force that was already en route to my doorstep. The doorbell rang at 8:17 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I was enjoying my coffee on the deck, reviewing code for a new project, when the persistent chiming forced me inside. Through the security camera, I saw a loaded minivan in my driveway and several figures crowded on my doorstep. I opened the door to find Amber standing front and center, looking remarkably unchanged from when I'd last seen her at Mom's funeral. Same highlighted blonde hair, same artificially plumped lips, same designer sunglasses that I strongly suspected were counterfeit. Behind her stood a tall, unshaven man in a wrinkled polo shirt, whom I recognized as her husband Derek. And surrounding them were 3 children I'd never met. A teenage boy glued to his phone, a preteen girl scowling at me, and a younger boy who was systematically removing landscaping rocks from my garden path and throwing them onto the lawn. Completing this tableau were 2 large dogs, a German Shepherd mix, and what appeared to be a pit bull, both straining against their leashes and barking at the seagulls overhead. "Surprise, Sammy!" Amber exclaimed, using a childhood nickname I'd always hated. She flung her arms around me before I could respond. "Dad told you we were coming, right? We drove straight through the night to get here. The kids are exhausted." I stood frozen in my doorway, trying to process the scene. "Dad mentioned you might need to stay for a few days, but he didn't say—" "A few days?" Amber laughed, nudging Derek. "Did you hear that, hon? Sam thinks we're just visiting for a few days." Derek smirked, revealing a chipped front tooth I didn't remember from our previous meetings. "Your dad explained everything, right? About our situation?" Before I could answer, Amber was already pushing past me into the house, the children and dogs following like a small tornado. "Kids, go find your rooms. Tyler, you and Jake can share the room with the bunk beds." "Wait," I interrupted, following them inside. "There aren't any bunk beds, and I don't understand what's happening here." Amber handed the dog leashes to her daughter. "Kaylee, take Beast and Thor out to the beach for a quick walk. They've been cooped up in the car forever." I stepped between Kaylee and the back door. "Hold on, you can't just let dogs loose on the beach. There are leash laws, and I don't even know if my HOA allows pets." "HOA?" Derek snorted. "You've gone full California, haven't you, Samantha? Next you'll be telling us about your gluten intolerance." Amber had already moved upstairs, and I heard doors opening and closing. I followed quickly, only to find her in my master bedroom, opening my closet doors. "This closet is amazing," she called out. "We'll definitely need this room. The other bedrooms are way too small for 2 adults." "Amber," I said, my voice rising, "you're not taking my bedroom. In fact, I'm still not clear on why you're here with your entire family and pets. Dad just said you needed a place to stay temporarily." She turned to me, her expression shifting to one I recognized from childhood, the look that always preceded tears that would inevitably summon our parents to her defense. "Dad promised us we could live here," she said, her voice trembling perfectly on cue. "He said you had this massive beach house all to yourself while we were being evicted with nowhere to go. He said family helps family." A single tear tracked down her cheek, smudging her mascara just enough to look pitiful but not enough to be unattractive. "Live here?" I repeated. "As in, permanently?" "Well, at least until we get back on our feet," Derek said, appearing in the doorway with a large suitcase. "Your father said it might take a while given the California job market, but that you'd understand." I pulled out my phone. "I need to call Dad." 10 minutes and 1 heated conversation later, I had my answers, though they provided little comfort. Dad confirmed he had indeed told Amber she could live in my beach house, though he downplayed the permanence, insisting he'd meant a few months at most. When I expressed my outrage at his presumption, he shifted to guilt tactics. "Your sister has nowhere else to go, Samantha. They've been living in their car for the past week. Would you rather your niece and nephews be homeless? After all we did for you growing up?" "All you did for me?" I nearly shouted. "I put myself through college. I built my career without any help from you or Mom. You've bailed Amber out of every bad decision she's ever made while I— That's enough, he interrupted. I'm disappointed in your selfishness. This isn't how we raised you. I ended the call and returned to find Amber and Derek had already moved their bags into my bedroom. The children had claimed the other bedrooms, and the dogs were wrestling on my white linen sofa. The peaceful Saturday I'd planned had evaporated. Amber, I said, struggling to keep my voice level, this isn't going to work long term. I understand you're in a difficult situation, so you can stay temporarily in the guest rooms, but I need a clear timeline and some ground rules. She nodded sympathetically. Of course, we totally understand. We're so grateful, Sammy. This is just until Derek lands his executive position. He's got some promising leads already. Derek puffed out his chest. I've got a second interview at a marketing firm next week. Director level, 6 figures. Once that comes through, we'll be out of your hair. Something about his confidence didn't ring true, but I was too overwhelmed to press further. As I turned to leave the room, I caught a glimpse of Amber and Derek exchanging a look, her mouth curving into a smirk that disappeared as soon as she noticed me watching. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was the beginning of something much worse. The first week with my unwanted house guests quickly established that temporary had very different meanings for Amber and me. By day 3, they had completely taken over my home, transforming my minimalist sanctuary into a chaotic disaster zone. My pristine white sofa now bore mysterious stains from the children's constant snacking. My carefully curated bookshelves had been emptied to make room for Tyler's gaming equipment. The glass coffee table I'd imported from Italy was now covered with Kaylee's nail polish collection and Jake's Lego constructions. The dogs, neither of whom appeared to have received any training, had claimed my deck as their personal bathroom, despite my repeated insistence that they be walked properly. Derek's contribution to the household was drinking my wine collection. I returned from work on Wednesday to find him, and 2 strangers introduced vaguely as buddies from back home lounging on my deck chairs, passing around a bottle of my 20-year-old Macallan that I'd been saving for a special occasion. "Hope you don't mind," he said, not bothering to stand when I entered. "Figured since we're family now, what's yours is ours, right?" Amber was no better. I discovered her wearing my designer clothes, claiming she'd just borrowed them for a job interview, though she returned my theory blazer with a lipstick stain on the collar. When I confronted her, she burst into tears, wailing about how I didn't understand what it was like to have nothing. "You've always been the lucky one," she sobbed. "Everything comes so easily to you while I struggle for every little thing." This narrative that my success was due to luck rather than discipline and hard work was so infuriating that I had to leave the room before saying something I'd regret. I found myself increasingly confined to the home office I'd converted from a small den, the only space they hadn't completely invaded. I extended my work hours just to avoid going home, something my team noticed. "Everything okay, Sam?" my colleague Martin asked after I volunteered to stay late for the 3rd night in a row. "You're usually the first one out the door at 5. I made excuses about project deadlines, unwilling to admit that I'd essentially become a refugee in my own home. When I did return each night, I'd find new violations of the boundaries I'd attempted to establish. The breaking point came on day 9. I returned from work to find Amber hosting what appeared to be a party for at least 15 people I'd never met. Music blasted from my sound system. Strangers were drinking my remaining alcohol, and someone had spilled red wine on my bedroom carpet. I found Amber in my walk-in closet with 3 women I didn't recognize, all of them trying on my clothes. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. Amber spun around, my favorite Chanel purse dangling from her arm. "Sammy, you're home early. I was just showing the girls your amazing closet. This is Trisha, Denise, and Kelly. We used to cheer together in high school." "Take my purse off and get these people out of my house," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Now, don't be so uptight," she pouted, though she did remove the purse. "It's just a little get-together. Derek needs to network for his job search." "Derek hasn't left the house to search for a job," I snapped. He's been drinking my liquor and playing video games with Tyler all week. That's not fair, she protested. He had that phone interview yesterday, which lasted all of 10 minutes before he was back on the couch. The women exchanged uncomfortable glances and slipped out of the closet, leaving us alone. I don't know what your problem is, Amber said, her voice hardening. Dad said you were happy to help us out. Dad lied, I replied. Just like he's been lying to me about you my entire life. I agreed to let you stay temporarily while you found your own place. It's been over a week, and you haven't looked at a single rental listing. We can't afford anything in this area, she said dismissively. And the schools here are so much better for the kids. That's not my problem. You need to find something within your budget, even if it's not in Malibu. Her expression changed then, a flash of anger replacing the perpetual victimhood. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? Little Miss Perfect with her fancy job and beach house. So selfish you won't even help your own family. I am helping, I insisted. But this is my home, not yours. I need you to respect that. We'll see what Dad has to say about this, she threatened, pulling out her phone. Go ahead, I challenged. Call him. I've been trying to reach him for 3 days, but suddenly he's not answering my calls. Something flickered across her face, satisfaction, perhaps, before she stormed out. I followed her downstairs and found Derek in the kitchen, rummaging through my refrigerator. The party's over, I announced to the room at large. Everyone who doesn't live here needs to leave now. You can't just kick our friends out, Derek protested, beer in hand. Watch me, I replied, moving to the sound system and shutting it off. The partygoers grumbled, but began collecting their things, sensing the tension. As the last of them filtered out, Derek approached me, towering over my 5'4" frame with his 6'2" bulk. You're making a mistake, he said quietly, his breath sour with alcohol. We can make things very difficult for you, if we want to. Is that a threat? I asked, refusing to be intimidated. He smiled unpleasantly. Just an observation. Family should stick together, right? Wouldn't want things to get ugly. I tried calling Dad again that night, and the next morning, and again that afternoon. Each time, the call went straight to voicemail. When I texted, I received only vague responses hours later. Working through some things. Talk soon. As I lay awake in the guest bedroom that night, having surrendered my master to avoid further conflict, I realized I was dealing with something far more calculated than I'd initially assumed. This wasn't just family dysfunction, it was a deliberate invasion. On the 12th day of my home's occupation, I arrived back from work earlier than usual, having scheduled a dentist appointment as an excuse to check on my house mid-afternoon. I found the house unexpectedly quiet. Amber had taken the kids to the beach, according to a hastily scrawled note on my kitchen counter, and Derek was supposedly at a job interview, though the half-empty beer can on the coffee table suggested he'd only recently left. I took advantage of the rare solitude to assess the damage to my home and gather my thoughts. That's when I noticed my home office door was ajar, a room I always kept locked since it contained my work, laptop, financial documents, and other personal items. The lock had been forced, the wood around it splintered slightly. Inside, my normally organized desk was in disarray. Filing cabinet drawers stood open, papers scattered across the floor. My heart raced as I checked my laptop, still there, but moved from its usual position. When I opened it, I found it had been accessed, despite being password protected. Most alarming was the open safe in my closet, a small fireproof box where I kept my passport, birth certificate, and other important documents. I quickly verified that nothing was missing, but several papers had clearly been examined and hastily returned. I was photographing the damage when I heard the front door open. I slipped my phone into my pocket and went downstairs to find Amber returning alone, looking surprised to see me. You're home early, she said, her tone accusatory, as if I'd violated some agreement by being in my own house. My office has been broken into, I replied, watching her face carefully. The lock was forced, and someone went through my personal and financial documents. A flash of panic crossed her features before she composed herself. That's terrible. Do you think it was a break-in? Should we call the police? I'm certain it wasn't a break-in, I said. Nothing else in the house was disturbed, and the security system wasn't triggered. Only someone inside the house could have done it. Her expression hardened. Are you accusing me of something? I'm stating facts. Someone went through my private documents, including financial statements, property records, and personal identification. Why would anyone do that, Amber? How should I know? She snapped. Maybe Derek was looking for a pen or something. In my locked safe? We stared at each other in tense silence until her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something in her expression shifted. A decision being made. Fine, she said suddenly. You want to know what's going on? I'll tell you. She sat down on my sofa, patting the spot beside her. I remained standing. Dad's in trouble, she began. Serious financial trouble. After Mom died, he got involved with some sketchy investment scheme. Lost almost everything. Then started gambling to try to make it back. This was news to me. What does that have to do with breaking into my office? He owes people money. Dangerous people, she continued. He needed a plan, a way out. When he visited your beach house, he saw the solution. My stomach dropped as I began to understand. Me. He saw me as his solution. She nodded. If you sold this place, there'd be enough to pay off his debts and set all of us up comfortably somewhere else. A fresh start for the whole family. So moving in wasn't about needing a temporary place to stay, I said slowly. It was about forcing me to sell my house. He said you'd never agree to it willingly. You've always been so, independent. But he thought if we established residency here, made it difficult for you to evict us legally, eventually you'd realize selling was your only option. The calculated nature of the betrayal stunned me. And you went along with this? She shrugged. He promised us 20% of the sale. Besides, you owe us after all these years of turning your back on family. I owe you? I repeated incredulously. After you've been given every advantage while I worked for everything I have? Oh, please, she scoffed. You've always thought you were better than us. Miss Perfect with her fancy degree and big salary. Some of us weren't born with your brains or your luck. It wasn't luck, I said through gritted teeth. It was work, hard work while you were partying and dropping out of community college. She rolled her eyes. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Anyway, it doesn't matter now. We've been here nearly 2 weeks. In California, that means we've established tenancy. You can't just kick us out, you'd need to formally evict us, which takes months. By then, Dad's plan is that you'll be so miserable you'll give up and sell. You've got to be kidding me, I breathed, though I feared she might be right about tenant rights. Want to see the text? She asked, pulling out her phone. Dad laid it all out. The whole plan. She scrolled through messages and held up the screen. There it was, in black and white, my father and sister plotting to take my home. Dad, once Sam lets you stay, make yourselves at home. Really at home. The more established you are, the better. Amber, what if she tries to kick us out? Dad. After 30 days, she can't. Squatters' rights. By then she'll be so fed up she'll want to sell just to be rid of you all. That's when we negotiate our cut. My hands shook as I read message after message detailing their scheme. Photos of my financial documents I didn't even know they'd taken. Discussions about my mortgage details. Plans to make my life so unbearable I'd surrender my home just to escape them. Why are you showing me this? I asked finally. Amber's smile was cold. Because it doesn't matter if you know. You can't stop it now. Derek looked it up. Once we've been here 30 days, we're legally tenants. You'd need to go through formal eviction proceedings, which take months. And California courts favor tenants, especially those with children. Get out, I whispered. No, she replied simply. We're not going anywhere. In fact, I think you should be the one to leave, since you're so unhappy with the arrangement. There's a nice extended stay hotel down the road. This is my house. For now, she agreed. But not for long. I'd start packing if I were you. Derek returned then with the children and dogs, all of them loudly demanding dinner. When he saw me confronting Amber, his expression darkened. "Problem?" he asked, moving to stand beside my sister. "Samantha knows," Amber told him. "I showed her dad's texts." Rather than appearing concerned, Derek seemed relieved. "Good. Tired of pretending anyway." He turned to me. "Look, you can do this the easy way or the hard way." "Easy way. You sell the place, we all get our share, everybody wins. Hard way, we make your life hell until you cave." I looked between them, my sister and her husband, standing in my living room, threatening me, and felt something inside me snap. Without another word, I walked upstairs, packed an overnight bag, and called a hotel. I couldn't stay another night under the same roof as these people, not while I processed this betrayal and figured out my next move. As I headed for the door, Derek called after me. "Smart choice. We'll take good care of the place while you're gone." I paused at the threshold. "This isn't over," I promised, though I had no idea how I would fight back. Then I walked out, the sound of their laughter following me to my car. The Harbor View Hotel was nothing like my beach house, but the small room with its view of the marina provided something I desperately needed: peace. I sat on the balcony the morning after my retreat, staring numbly at the boats bobbing in the water below, my coffee growing cold beside me. How had my life imploded so completely in less than 2 weeks? I'd spent the night researching tenant law in California, and the news wasn't good. While Amber had exaggerated their rights, they hadn't quite established legal tenancy yet. They weren't far off. If they remained in my house much longer, removing them would become significantly more difficult. I was contemplating this bleak reality when a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Excuse me, but is that seat taken?" I looked up to find a woman about my age gesturing to the empty chair at my small balcony table. The hotel's outdoor cafe was crowded with breakfast patrons, and most tables were full. "Help yourself," I said, forcing a polite smile. "Thanks. I'm Julia, by the way," she said, setting down a plate of Belgian waffles and extending her hand. "Samantha," I replied, shaking it briefly. She must have noticed my reddened eyes or general dishevelment, because her expression softened. "Rough morning?" I meant to offer some vague pleasantry, a practice I'm fine to avoid conversation with a stranger, but to my horror, my voice caught and tears welled in my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, hastily wiping them away. "It's been a difficult few days." Instead of retreating from my emotional display, Julia reached into her purse and handed me a tissue. "I know we just met, but sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger. No judgment, no history." Perhaps it was the genuine kindness in her voice, or simply my desperate need to unburden myself to someone, but I found myself telling Julia everything: the beach house, Amber and her family, my father's betrayal, and my current exile. She listened attentively, asking occasional questions but mostly just allowing me to vent. When I finished, I felt embarrassed by my outburst. "I'm so sorry to dump all this on you," I apologized. "You just wanted a seat for breakfast, not someone's life crisis." Julia smiled. "Actually, this is the most interesting breakfast conversation I've had in ages." She reached into her purse again, this time extracting a business card which she slid across the table. "And as it happens, I might be able to help." The card identified her as Julia Reeves, family law attorney. "You're a lawyer?" I asked, hope flickering for the first time in days. "I am. And while family law is my specialty, I've handled plenty of tenant disputes and property issues." She took a sip of her coffee. "From what you've told me, your sister and her family haven't established legal tenancy yet. They've been there, 12 days? 13, I confirmed. "In California, the magic number is 30, she said. "Once they've occupied your home for 30 consecutive days, they gain certain protections as tenants, even without a formal lease. But we're not there yet, so I can just kick them out?" "Not exactly," she cautioned. "Even without established tenancy, removing unwanted guests isn't as simple as changing the locks. But you have more options now than you will in 2 weeks." She checked her watch. "I have a court appearance this morning, but I'm free this afternoon. Why don't we meet and discuss strategy?" For the first time since Amber arrived on my doorstep, I felt a glimmer of hope. That would be amazing. Julia suggested we meet at her office at 2, and as we parted ways, she added, "Bring any documentation you have, property records, text messages, photos of damage. And Samantha? You're not alone in this. Family betrayal is more common than you might think." I spent the morning gathering evidence, taking screenshots of the text exchanges Amber had shown me, downloading security camera footage from my home system, and collecting financial records proving my sole ownership of the property. Julia's office was in a modern building overlooking the ocean, the walls adorned with her credentials and family photos. She reviewed my documentation with professional efficiency, occasionally making notes. "This is good," she said finally. "Especially those text messages showing premeditated intent to establish fraudulent tenancy. But before we discuss legal options, I want to introduce you to someone." She pressed a button on her desk phone. "Ryan, can you join us?" A moment later, a tall man with the same warm brown eyes as Julia entered the office. "This is my brother Ryan," she explained. "He runs a security consulting firm that specializes in property protection and, relevantly for you, peaceful conflict resolution." Ryan shook my hand. "Julia filled me in on your situation. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Ryan's experience in law enforcement gives him unique insight into handling volatile domestic situations, Julia added. "I thought he might have some practical advice while we pursue legal remedies." Over the next hour, the siblings outlined a comprehensive strategy for reclaiming my home. Ryan suggested installing additional security cameras and changing the security system access codes immediately. He offered to accompany me when I returned to the house, providing both protection and a witness to any confrontation. "The goal is to regain control of your property without escalating to violence," he explained. "Most squatters and unwanted guests rely on intimidation, but they back down when faced with calm, firm opposition and evidence of legal consequences." As we discussed next steps, Julia's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to me with an unexpected smile. "That was Gerald Hoffman, my neighbor from down the hall. He overheard part of our discussion when he stopped by earlier and wanted me to invite you to dinner tonight. He thinks he might have additional insights for your situation." "Gerald is a retired judge," Ryan explained. "Family court, 27 years on the bench. If anyone knows how to navigate this mess, it's him." That evening, I found myself in Gerald Hoffman's elegant penthouse apartment, surrounded by new allies. Gerald, a distinguished gentleman in his 70s with a shock of white hair and penetrating blue eyes, listened intently to my story before offering his perspective. "Your sister and father are counting on your isolation," he said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in the courtroom. "People who manipulate and exploit others always try to isolate their targets first. They're betting you won't fight back because you don't have anyone in your corner." He gestured around the room. "But now you do, and that changes everything." Julia's husband Mark, a contractor, offered to assess and document the damage to my home for insurance purposes. Their friend Sophie, a real estate attorney, volunteered to review my property documents to ensure everything was in order. Even Julia's teenage daughter Emma chimed in, offering to help clean and restore my home once the intruders were removed. "This is overwhelming," I admitted, touched by the kindness of these strangers. "Why are you all helping me? You barely know me." Gerald exchanged glances with Julia before answering. 3 years ago, Julia's ex-husband tried to take everything from her, her home, her practice, even custody of Emma. The legal system, which she dedicated her career to, suddenly seemed stacked against her. "I was ready to give up," Julia admitted. Then Gerald and Ryan stepped in. They rallied people around me, helped me fight back. Without them, I might have lost everything. "We formed an informal support network," Gerald explained. "People helping people navigate complex legal and personal crises. Sometimes, all it takes is knowing you're not alone." As the evening progressed, we moved from crisis management to concrete planning. By the time I returned to my hotel room that night, I had something I hadn't possessed when I woke up that morning. Hope. I also had a text message from my father. Amber says you moved out. Good decision. My attorney will contact you about selling the house. Instead of despair, I felt a surge of determination. They thought I was retreating, giving up. They had no idea I was gathering reinforcements for the battle ahead. I fell asleep that night with Julia's parting words echoing in my mind. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most. 3 days after meeting my unexpected allies, I stood on the sidewalk outside my beach house, staring at the property that no longer felt like home. Beside me were Julia, Ryan, and Mark, all of us dressed in casual clothes that belied the seriousness of our mission. Remember the plan, Julia reminded me quietly. We're documenting evidence, not confronting them. If they're not home, even better. Ryan checked his watch. According to your neighbor's text, Amber left with the kids about an hour ago. Derek's car isn't in the driveway, so there's a good chance the house is empty. I took a deep breath and walked up the path to my front door, key in hand. The others followed at a respectful distance, Ryan carrying a professional camera and Mark holding a clipboard with property assessment forms. When my key failed to work in the lock, I wasn't surprised. They changed the locks, I said, turning back to the group. That works in our favor legally, Julia noted, making a quick record with her phone camera. Changing locks on a property they don't own strengthens our case for illegal occupation. Mark stepped forward. I can get us in without damaging the door. As a contractor who specialized in home renovations, Mark had the tools and expertise to open the door without leaving evidence of forced entry. Within minutes, we were inside my house. The devastation was worse than I'd imagined. What had been a tasteful, clean, modern home was now a chaotic mess of discarded food containers, piles of laundry, and damaged furniture. The white walls were marked with handprints and crayon drawings. The hardwood floors were scratched from the dog's nails. The kitchen countertops were burned in several places from hot pans placed directly on the surface. Jesus, Ryan muttered, already taking systematic photos of the damage. Mark whistled low. This is deliberate destruction, not just messy living. These scratches on the wall? Those were made with something sharp, not accidental. While they documented the physical state of the house, I moved to my home office, relieved to find it still locked despite their earlier break-in. I used my spare key to enter, and immediately went to work, backing up files from my desktop computer and collecting important documents I hadn't taken with me. Julia joined me, helping organize papers into relevant categories: property records, financial statements, evidence of damage, and communications with my father and sister. She handled everything with professional efficiency, occasionally pointing out documents that would be particularly helpful for our case. Look at this, I said suddenly, pulling up my home security system on my computer. The system had been inactive. They'd disabled it shortly after moving in, but it had recorded the first few days of their occupation before being shut off. We watched footage of Derek systematically opening drawers and cabinets throughout the house, photographing my personal documents with his phone. Another clip showed Amber trying on my clothes and jewelry, carefully recording each item in a notebook. Most disturbing was footage of Derek instructing his children to play rough in various rooms, encouraging them to jump on furniture and throw toys at the walls. This is gold, Julia said, helping me download the video files. It shows clear intent to occupy and damage the property. Ryan appeared in the doorway. You need to see this, he said grimly. He led us to the guest bedroom where I'd found missing items from my closet arranged in neat piles, along with several pieces of electronics I recognized as mine. They're selling your stuff, Ryan explained, showing photos he'd taken of browser tabs left open on Derek's laptop, which sat on the bed. Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist. They've been systematically cataloging your possessions and listing them for sale. The betrayal cut deep, but the evidence was strengthening our position. We continued our documentation, moving methodically through the house. In my bedroom, now occupied by Amber and Derek, Mark discovered empty baggies with white residue tucked behind the nightstand. I'm not making accusations, he said carefully, but you might want to document this. Drug use in the home could be relevant if this goes to court. In the kitchen, I found several official-looking documents on the counter. Closer inspection revealed they were loan applications and credit card forms in my name, with forged signatures. Identity theft, Julia noted, carefully placing the papers in an evidence envelope. That elevates this from a tenant dispute to criminal activity. We had been in the house for about an hour when Ryan's phone buzzed. Neighbor says Amber's car just turned onto the street. We've got maybe 2 minutes. We moved quickly, gathering our evidence and preparing to leave. As we headed for the door, I paused in the living room, struck by a photo that hadn't been there before. It showed Amber, Derek, and the children posed in front of my house, all smiling broadly as if they belonged there. The casual appropriation of my home for their family portrait was the final straw. We were halfway down the driveway when Amber's minivan pulled up, blocking our path. She emerged, shopping bags in hand, her expression shifting from surprise to anger when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "This is our house now. You moved out." "This is my property," I replied calmly, aware of Ryan recording the interaction. "I have every right to be here." Derek appeared from a second car I hadn't noticed parked across the street. He moved to stand beside Amber, his posture aggressive. "You changed the locks," he accused, ignoring the fact that they had done exactly that. "We have documented evidence of your illegal occupation and destruction of property," Julia interjected, stepping forward. "I'm Miss Mitchell's attorney. We also have evidence of theft, identity fraud, and possession of controlled substances." Derek's face paled slightly, but Amber scoffed. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can," Ryan said, holding up his camera. "Everything's documented, including the sale of Miss Mitchell's possessions online." "Who the hell are you people?" Derek demanded, his voice rising. "I'm a security consultant," Ryan replied evenly. "This gentleman is a licensed contractor documenting property damage for insurance purposes. We're all here as witnesses to the condition of Miss Mitchell's home and your illegal activities." Amber turned to me, her expression ugly with rage. "You think you can intimidate us? Dad will never let you get away with this. He promised us this house." "Your father doesn't own this house," Julia pointed out. "He has no legal right to promise it to anyone." "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises," I said, finding strength in the support of my new allies. "After that, we'll proceed with formal eviction and criminal charges." Derek took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. "You threatening us?" Ryan moved subtly between us. "Sir, I wouldn't recommend making threats while being recorded. Assault charges would only complicate your situation." For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then the front door burst open as the 3 children and dogs spilled out, apparently having entered through the back door during our confrontation. "Mom!" Kaylee called. "The internet's not working again." The mundane complaint broke the standoff. Amber shot me a venomous look before turning to her daughter. "Not now, Kaylee. Go back inside." "Actually, don't," I said. "The property is being fumigated tomorrow for termites. It's not safe to stay here." It was a lie, but a strategic one that Julia had suggested. "Sometimes," she'd explained, "you need to create urgency for voluntary departure before pursuing legal eviction." "You can't just kick us out," Amber protested. "We have rights." "You've been here 16 days, Julia responded. "That's not enough to establish tenancy rights in California. Additionally, we have evidence of criminal activity, which supersedes any residency claims you might make." As we continued this tense exchange, a police car pulled up to the curb. Gerald stepped out of the passenger side, followed by a uniformed officer. "Judge Hoffman." The officer acknowledged respectfully. "This the situation you mentioned?" Gerald nodded gravely. "Officer Martinez, this is the homeowner, Samantha Mitchell. These individuals have unlawfully occupied her residence and damaged her property." The arrival of law enforcement shifted the dynamic dramatically. Officer Martinez requested identification from everyone present, then listened as Julia calmly presented our documentation and evidence. Derek grew increasingly agitated. "This is bull," he began, but Amber cut him off with a sharp elbow to his side. "There must be some misunderstanding," she said, her voice suddenly saccharine. "Our father told us we could stay here. It's a family arrangement." "Do you have documentation of this arrangement?" Officer Martinez asked. "A lease agreement, perhaps?" "It was verbal," Amber admitted. "I see." The officer turned to me. "And you're the legal owner of the property?" Julia handed him copies of my deed and property tax records. "Miss Mitchell is the sole owner. There are no other names on the title." After reviewing the documents and conferring briefly with Gerald, Officer Martinez addressed Amber and Derek. "Based on the evidence presented, you don't have legal tenant status. The homeowner has asked you to leave. I strongly suggest you comply voluntarily to avoid further legal complications." "This is ridiculous," Derek exploded. "We've been living here. We have rights." "Sir, please lower your voice," the officer warned. "Judge Hoffman has reviewed the situation and concurs with the assessment. You can leave voluntarily today, or face formal eviction proceedings and potential criminal charges based on the evidence collected." As Derek continued to protest, my phone rang. It was my father. "Samantha," he began without preamble. "What's this nonsense about evicting your sister? I told you." "You're on speakerphone, Dad," I interrupted. "I'm standing outside my house with my attorney, a security consultant, a contractor, a retired judge, and a police officer. We've documented the damage Amber and Derek have done to my property, as well as evidence of theft, fraud, and drug possession." Silence stretched across the line before he responded. "You're bluffing." "Would you like to speak to Officer Martinez?" I offered, holding the phone toward the policeman. "Sir, this is Officer Martinez, LAPD. I've reviewed the documentation and concur that the current occupants have no legal right to remain in the property against the owner's wishes." More silence, then my father's voice, suddenly conciliatory. "There's been a misunderstanding. I only meant for Amber to stay temporarily." "That's not what your text messages indicate," Julia interjected. "We have documented evidence of your instructions to your daughter to establish fraudulent tenancy and force Miss Mitchell to sell her property." I could almost hear the wheels turning in my father's mind as he realized his plan had collapsed. "I'm coming over," he announced. "That's your right," Julia responded. "But be advised that we're prepared to pursue legal action against anyone involved in this fraudulent scheme, including you." 20 minutes later, my father's car pulled up. He looked older than when I'd last seen him, his face drawn with stress. As he approached our group still gathered in the driveway, I felt a complex mixture of anger, grief, and pity. "Dad," I acknowledged coolly. He glanced around at the assembled witnesses, perhaps finally understanding that his manipulation had met its match. "Can we speak privately?" "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my advocates," I replied. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I've been in financial trouble since your mother died. Gambling debts, bad investments. I was desperate. So you decided to steal my home?" I asked, my voice steady despite the hurt. I thought it would solve everyone's problems. You have this big house all to yourself, while Amber's family struggles. It seemed fair somehow." "Fair?" I repeated incredulously. "You conspired to force me out of my own home. You coached Amber to establish fraudulent tenancy. You ignored my calls when I needed help. What part of that is fair?" He had no answer, just hollow excuses about family obligations and financial pressures. As he spoke, I realized something had fundamentally changed. The father I had spent my life trying to please, whose approval I had secretly craved despite years of favoritism toward Amber, now seemed diminished, a sad, desperate man who had sacrificed his integrity and betrayed his daughter. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, interrupting his rambling justifications. "Amber, Derek, and their family will vacate my house today. They will return any property they've taken and cease all fraudulent activities in my name. In return, I won't press charges this time. And where are they supposed to go? My father demanded, a flash of his earlier entitlement returning. That's not my problem, I replied. You created this situation. You can help them find a solution that doesn't involve stealing my home. The next few hours were tense but productive. Under Officer Martinez's supervision, Amber and her family packed their belongings. Julia documented the return of my stolen items, while Mark continued assessing damage for insurance purposes. Ryan ensured the security system was restored and changed all access codes. As Amber carried her last bag to the minivan, she paused beside me. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming." I met her gaze steadily. "Actually, I do. You're going to leave my property, stop using my name fraudulently, and move on with your life. Because if you don't, I have enough evidence to ensure you and Derek spend significant time in jail." She flinched at the calm certainty in my voice before storming off to join her family. My father followed shortly after, pausing only to say, "I'm sorry it came to this." "So am I replied, watching as they drove away. 3 vehicles carrying away the people who had tried to steal everything I'd worked for. As the sun set over the ocean, I stood in my damaged but reclaimed home, surrounded by my new allies, people who had shown more loyalty in a week than my blood relatives had in a lifetime. "First round of repairs starts tomorrow," Mark announced, reviewing his assessment notes. "We'll have this place back in shape within a couple of weeks." "I'll file the restraining order first thing in the morning," Julia added. "That should keep them from trying to return." "And I'll upgrade your security system," Ryan offered. "No one will break in here again." Gerald placed a grandfatherly hand on my shoulder. "The worst is over," he assured me. "Now the healing begins." As they left for the evening, promising to return the next day, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. My home was damaged, my family relationships shattered, but something new and precious had emerged from the chaos, a chosen family built on mutual respect and genuine support. I walked through my empty house, reclaiming each room with my presence. In the master bedroom, I stripped the sheets Amber and Derek had used and opened the windows wide, letting the ocean breeze clear away the last traces of their occupation. Tomorrow would bring contractors, repairs, and legal paperwork, but tonight I was simply grateful to be home. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "You did well today. Remember, family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to stand beside you." I smiled, typing back, "Thank you for standing beside me." For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly in my own bed, the sound of waves crashing against the shore outside my window, no longer a prisoner in my own life. The morning after reclaiming my home, I woke to a series of notifications on my phone that immediately ended any sense of relief I'd felt the night before. My social media accounts were flooded with messages from extended family members, childhood acquaintances, and even current colleagues, all responding to posts that Amber had apparently shared overnight. "How could you throw your own sister and her children out on the street? I always knew you were selfish, but this is beyond cruel. Your mother would be ashamed of you." With growing horror, I scrolled through my Facebook page to find that Amber had crafted an elaborate narrative. According to her posts, I had invited her family to live with me after they lost their home in a fire, only to cruelly evict them without warning once they'd settled in, leaving them homeless and desperate. She'd included photos of her children looking forlorn outside a motel, claiming they now had nowhere to go because of my heartless greed. The comments were vicious, with distant relatives and mutual acquaintances piling on with their own condemnations. Several people mentioned calling my employer to report my disgusting behavior, while others suggested organizing a protest outside my home. My hands shaking, I called Julia, who answered immediately, despite the early hour. "I've seen it," she said without preamble. "I was about to call you. This is a classic Darvo response. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. They're trying to control the narrative." "It's working," I said, scrolling through more messages. "My second cousin just called me a monster, and she hasn't spoken to me in 15 years. Social media mob mentality," Julia sighed. Listen, don't respond to any of it yet. We need to approach this strategically. Can you come to my office this morning? 2 hours later, I sat in Julia's conference room with Ryan and Gerald, all of us reviewing the growing online firestorm. My father had joined the fray, posting a heartfelt plea for understanding and compassion for my younger daughter during this difficult time, implicitly supporting Amber's false narrative. The social media attack is just the beginning, Ryan warned, showing us a report from his security team. There's been unusual traffic outside your house, cars slowing down, people taking photos. Amber posted your address in a private group with over 500 members. That's not just malicious, Gerald noted grimly. It's potentially dangerous. As we were discussing security measures, my phone rang. It was Martin, my direct supervisor at work. Samantha, he began awkwardly. I need you to come in for a meeting with HR this afternoon. We've received some concerning reports. Let me guess, I said wearily. Someone contacted you about my homeless sister? His surprised silence confirmed my suspicion. Actually, we've received multiple communications. The HR director's email has been flooded since last night. One of our clients even called saying they're reconsidering their contract because of ethical concerns about working with you. I explained the situation as succinctly as possible, promising to bring documentation to prove my side of the story. Martin sounded relieved but cautious. Just come in and clear this up, he said. Until then, you should probably work remotely. After ending the call, I looked up to find Julia already typing an email. I'm drafting a cease and desist letter to both Amber and your father, she explained. This crosses the line from family drama into defamation and harassment. Will that actually help? I asked doubtfully. It's a first step, she replied. It creates a paper trail showing we formally asked them to stop spreading falsehoods. If they continue, it strengthens any future legal action. Gerald, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward. The immediate concern is your safety and reputation. Ryan's team can handle security at your home, but we need to address the public narrative. Wouldn't responding just add fuel to the fire? I asked. Not necessarily, Gerald said. What if we could find others who've experienced similar exploitation by Amber and your father? People who might be willing to share their stories? Ryan nodded thoughtfully. I know a private investigator who specializes in financial fraud. If your father has a gambling problem and history of schemes like this, there are likely other victims. Thus began the most surreal week of my life. While contractors repaired my damaged home, I was essentially living in exile, staying in a hotel again because Ryan deemed my house too exposed, given the online attention. I took administrative leave from work while the HR department investigated the allegations against me. My social standing in both my family and community had been decimated overnight by Amber's calculated attack. On Wednesday, things escalated further. I was grocery shopping when two police officers approached me in the produce section. Miss Mitchell? One asked. We need you to come with us to answer some questions. In the sterile interview room at the police station, I learned that Amber had filed a report claiming I had threatened her children with physical harm during the eviction. The allegation was completely fabricated, but I spent 3 hours being questioned before they finally allowed me to leave, the experience leaving me shaken and humiliated. Julia was livid when I called her afterward. This is harassment by proxy, she fumed. They're using the legal system to punish you for standing up to them. That evening, Ryan's security team reported that someone had spray-painted child abuser across my garage door. The next morning, I received an email from my homeowners association regarding multiple complaints about disturbances at my property. By Friday, even my favorite coffee shop felt unsafe after the barista, who normally greeted me by name, suddenly became cold and distant, clearly having seen the social media posts. I was reaching my breaking point, exactly what Amber and my father wanted. Their strategy was clear: make my life so unbearable that selling the house would seem like the only escape from the nightmare they had created. I can't do this anymore, I admitted to Julia during our daily check-in. Maybe I should just sell the house and move somewhere they can't find me. Her expression softened with understanding before hardening with resolve. That's exactly what they want you to think, that fighting back is harder than giving in. But I promise you, if you surrender your home now, they'll find other ways to exploit you in the future. This pattern doesn't end until you break it. She was right, but knowing that didn't make the reality any easier to bear. My entire life had been upended. I couldn't work, couldn't safely live in my own home, couldn't even buy groceries without the fear of public confrontation. The turning point came unexpectedly. Ryan's investigator had been digging into my father's gambling activities and Amber's financial history, and what he uncovered was more extensive than any of us had anticipated. They've done this before, Ryan explained, spreading documents across Julia's conference table, 3 times that we can confirm so far. The pattern was consistent. My father would identify a family member or close friend with significant assets, then work with Amber to create a situation where the target felt obligated to provide financial assistance. In one case, they had convinced my mother's elderly cousin to add them to her bank accounts to help manage her finances, only to drain the accounts once they had access. In another, they had moved in with a family friend after a supposed crisis, then refused to leave until the friend paid them to go away. Your beach house was just their most ambitious target yet, Ryan concluded. But the tactics are identical. The investigator had located 2 of their previous victims who were willing to speak with me. The first was Patricia, my mother's cousin, who was now living in a nursing home after losing most of her savings to my father's manipulation. The second was James, once a close friend of my parents, who had lost his rental property to them through a scheme similar to what they had attempted with me. Meeting these people, hearing their stories of betrayal, manipulation, and financial loss was both heartbreaking and strangely validating. I wasn't crazy or paranoid. The pattern was real, and I wasn't the first target. They were counting on your isolation and family loyalty to keep you quiet, Patricia told me, her gnarled hands clutching mine. That's how they got me. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone what was happening until it was too late. James nodded in agreement. When I finally tried to expose them, they did exactly what they're doing to you now, turned the whole community against me with lies. I lost friends I'd had for 30 years because I was too ashamed to fight back publicly. Their stories strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about my beach house anymore. It was about breaking a cycle of exploitation that had hurt others before me and would continue to hurt more if left unchecked. With Julia's guidance, we developed a new strategy. Instead of merely defending against Amber's attacks, we would go on offense. The private investigator continued gathering evidence of past schemes, while Julia prepared legal documents for a restraining order and potential lawsuit for defamation, harassment, and emotional distress. The most difficult decision was agreeing to Ryan's suggestion that we meet with the district attorney to discuss potential criminal charges. The evidence of identity theft, alone the credit applications in my name, was enough to warrant investigation, and when combined with the pattern of financial exploitation of Patricia and James, it painted a picture of ongoing criminal activity. They need to face real consequences, Ryan argued. Otherwise, they'll just find another victim. I struggled with the decision. Despite everything, these were still my family members. The thought of them facing criminal charges was painful. But remembering Patricia's depleted savings and James's lost property, and knowing there were likely other victims we hadn't yet identified, I finally agreed. The meeting with the assistant district attorney was scheduled for Monday morning. I spent the weekend preparing, reviewing evidence with Julia, and practicing how to present my story clearly and factually. But Amber had one more card to play. Sunday night, while I was still staying at the hotel, Ryan's security team alerted me to a break-in at my beach house. The security cameras captured Amber, Derek, and the oldest son, Tyler, forcing open a window and entering the property around midnight. "We've called the police," Ryan assured me over the phone. "My team is maintaining visual contact but not engaging directly for safety reasons." I watched the security feed on my phone in real time, heart pounding as they moved through my house, methodically opening drawers and cabinets as if searching for something specific. When they entered my home office and began attempting to access my computer, the police finally arrived. The resulting footage was both vindicating and disturbing. Amber screaming that it was her house, Derek attempting to physically intimidate the officers, Tyler being handcuffed after he tried to flee with my laptop. All three were arrested for breaking and entering, with potential additional charges for attempted theft and property damage. As they were led to police cars, my father arrived, apparently having been called by Amber when the police showed up. The cameras captured his attempt to intervene, claiming there was a family misunderstanding and offering to make this right financially. His efforts only resulted in him making incriminating statements that further revealed the scheme. By morning, news of the arrests had spread through my extended family and social networks. The narrative was shifting as people began to question Amber's previous claims in light of her arrest for breaking into my home. Several relatives who had been most vocal in condemning me now reached out with awkward apologies or simply went silent. When I arrived at work Monday morning for my meeting with HR, I was surprised to find Martin waiting for me in the lobby. "The meeting's been canceled," he informed me. "After reviewing the documentation your attorney provided and, frankly, after seeing the news about your sister's arrest, HR has dismissed all complaints against you as unfounded." He hesitated before adding, "I'm sorry you've been going through this, Samantha. If there's anything the company can do to support you." I thanked him, relieved that at least one aspect of the chaos was resolving. But as I turned to leave, he called after me. "The Richardson account, the client who was concerned, they called this morning to apologize for jumping to conclusions. Said they value our partnership too much to let internet drama affect our business relationship." The tide was turning, but I knew the battle was far from over. Amber, Derek, and Tyler had been released on bail by Monday afternoon, and my father was undoubtedly working to minimize the damage to their reputations. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I might actually emerge from it with my life intact. As Julia reminded me after our successful meeting with the district attorney, who had agreed to open an investigation into the pattern of financial exploitation, they wanted to make you feel powerless. The best revenge is showing them and yourself that you never were. 3 weeks after the break-in incident, I sat across from Julia in her office, reviewing our progress. The physical repairs to my beach house were nearly complete, thanks to Mark's efficient team. Ryan's security upgrades had transformed my home into a virtual fortress, with advanced cameras, reinforced doors, and a new alarm system that would immediately alert both the security company and the police of any intrusion. Most importantly, I had moved back into my home, reclaiming my space and my life piece by piece. But today's meeting wasn't about the practical aspects of recovery. It was about implementing the strategy Julia had proposed, one that would permanently end the threat from my father and sister. "The district attorney believes we have enough evidence for criminal charges," Julia explained, reviewing notes from our latest meeting with prosecutors. "Identity theft, attempted fraud, breaking and entering, harassment, defamation, the list is substantial." "And they're still denying everything?" I asked. She nodded. "Your father's attorney has reached out about a potential family resolution outside the courts, but they're not admitting any wrongdoing. They're still hoping to wear you down." "What exactly does a family resolution mean to them?" "Based on the proposal, they want you to drop all charges and complaints in exchange for a promise to leave you alone. No admission of guilt, no restitution for damages, and no guarantees they won't try something similar with someone else in the future." I shook my head. "That's not resolution, that's capitulation." "Exactly," Julia agreed. "Which is why I think it's time to implement our offensive strategy. Are you ready for that?" The plan we had developed over the previous weeks was comprehensive and, admittedly, somewhat intimidating. Instead of merely defending against their attacks and pursuing criminal charges, we would systematically dismantle the infrastructure of manipulation they had built over years. First, the private investigator Ryan had completed his report on my father and Amber's activities over the past decade. The findings were even more extensive than we'd initially discovered. 6 separate incidents of financial exploitation, targeting elderly relatives, family friends, and former business associates. In each case, they had used similar tactics, manufactured crises, emotional manipulation, and eventually threats when the victim began to resist. Second, Julia had located and interviewed 4 of these previous victims, all of whom were now willing to come forward with their stories after learning they weren't alone. Patricia and James had even agreed to join our legal action as co-plaintiffs, strengthening the case significantly. Third, we had compiled extensive documentation of the social media smear campaign, false police reports, and workplace harassment that had followed my refusal to surrender my home. This evidence painted a clear picture of a coordinated effort to destroy my reputation and livelihood after their initial plan failed. The district attorney is prepared to move forward with charges, Julia continued, but wanted me to convey that a plea deal is still possible if your father and sister are willing to accept responsibility and make restitution. And if they're not? I asked, already knowing the answer. Then we proceed with both criminal prosecution and civil litigation. The evidence is overwhelming, Samantha. They would likely face jail time, significant financial penalties, and a permanent record that would make it difficult for them to victimize others in the future. I took a deep breath, considering the implications. This wasn't a decision to be made lightly. Criminal charges would permanently alter my relationship with my father and sister, though truthfully, that relationship had already been destroyed by their actions. The question now was whether I was prepared to be the one who ensured they faced consequences. What about the children? I asked, thinking of my niece and nephews who, despite their parents' behavior, were still innocent parties in this mess. Child Services has been involved since the arrests, Julia reminded me. The preliminary assessment suggests they're not in immediate danger, but there are concerns about the home environment. Your father has apparently been acting as a stabilizing influence, taking them to school and providing meals when Amber and Derek are unavailable. The implication was clear. My sister and her husband's problems extended beyond financial manipulation to potential neglect of their children. It was heartbreaking, but not entirely surprising, given the glimpses I'd seen during their brief occupation of my home. Would pursuing charges make things worse for the kids? I wondered aloud. Possibly in the short term, Julia acknowledged. But consider the long-term impact of them growing up, watching their parents exploit others without consequences. What lessons are they learning now about how to treat people? It was a sobering thought. Tyler, at 15, was already following his parents' example, participating in the break-in and attempted theft. Kaylee and Jake might soon follow the same path without intervention. After hours of discussion, weighing moral, practical, and emotional considerations, I reached my decision. We would move forward with the full legal strategy, offering one final opportunity for a plea agreement that would include mandatory counseling, restitution, and a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. If they rejected this offer, we would proceed to court. Julia drafted the formal communication that afternoon, and by evening it had been delivered to my father's attorney. We expected at least a few days before receiving a response, but events accelerated unexpectedly the very next morning. I was in my kitchen preparing coffee when Ryan called with an urgent update. My beach house security system had detected unusual activity overnight. Review of the footage revealed Amber attempting to access the property again, this time alone, at approximately 3 a.m. She didn't get in, Ryan assured me. The new security measures worked perfectly, but she spent nearly 20 minutes trying different entry points before giving up. The concerning part is what she was carrying. She had what appeared to be a gasoline can. A chill ran through me at the implication. You think she was going to set fire to my house? The footage isn't conclusive about her intentions, Ryan said carefully. But given the container and her previous escalations, we've reported this to both the police and the district attorney as a potential attempted arson. The situation was spiraling beyond even our worst predictions. What had begun as a scheme to take my home had evolved into something much darker, potentially life-threatening. This wasn't just about property anymore, it was about my physical safety. Within hours, police had arrested Amber based on the security footage and the violation of the temporary restraining order I'd obtained after the previous break-in. When questioned, she claimed she had merely been checking on the property and that the container held cleaning supplies she wanted to leave as a peace offering. The police didn't find this explanation credible given the time of her visit and her furtive behavior on camera. The arrest triggered a cascade of events. Derek, apparently panicking at the prospect of being implicated in another criminal act, contacted the district attorney's office through a hastily acquired lawyer, offering to provide evidence against both Amber and my father in exchange for leniency. "He's turning on them," Julia explained during an emergency meeting that afternoon. According to the DA, he's claiming he was pressured into participating in their schemes and has documentation of previous victims we haven't even identified yet. "Do you believe him?" I asked skeptically. "About being an unwilling participant?" "Not for a second," she replied, "but his information appears to be legitimate. He's provided emails, text messages, and even recorded conversations detailing how they selected targets and coordinated their approach." The final domino fell that evening when my father, perhaps realizing the severity of the situation after Amber's arrest and Derek's betrayal, suffered what was initially reported as a heart attack while meeting with his attorney. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors determined he had experienced a stress-induced cardiac event, serious but not life-threatening. From his hospital bed, he made the decision that would ultimately resolve the legal aspects of our conflict. He agreed to the plea deal, accepting responsibility for his role in the scheme, and agreeing to make full restitution to all identified victims. In exchange, the most serious charges would be reduced, likely resulting in probation rather than jail time given his age and health condition. Amber, without her father's support or her husband's loyalty, found herself in a precarious legal position, facing multiple serious charges, and with Derek now testifying against her, her attorney strongly advised accepting a similar plea arrangement. After initially refusing, the reality of potential years in prison versus a shorter sentence with the possibility of probation finally persuaded her. The resolution came, not with a dramatic courtroom confrontation, but with signatures on legal documents. My father and sister formally admitted to their actions, agreed to financial restitution, accepted restraining orders preventing contact with me and the other victims, and committed to mandatory counseling and monitoring. Derek received more lenient treatment in exchange for his cooperation, but was still held accountable for his participation. As for the children, the court appointed a guardian ad litem to assess their situation and make recommendations for their welfare. My father, once stabilized, petitioned for temporary guardianship, while Amber completed her legal obligations, and Derek sought treatment for substance abuse issues that had emerged during the investigation. In the midst of these legal proceedings, I received an unexpected letter from my father, not a manipulative plea or angry accusation, but what appeared to be a genuine attempt at accountability. "Samantha, I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. What I did to you, what I've been doing to you and others for years is unforgivable." The heart event I experienced was a wake-up call in more ways than one. For the first time, I'm seeing clearly what I've become and the damage I've caused. I'm working with a therapist to understand why I've spent decades favoring Amber while taking you for granted. The preliminary answers aren't flattering, I see, now that I resented your independence and self-sufficiency because they highlighted my own failures and Amber's dependencies. It was easier to villainize you than to acknowledge my shortcomings as a father to both of you. None of this excuses my actions. I'm writing not to repair our relationship. I understand that may be impossible, but to acknowledge the truth. You deserved better from me. You always have. I've agreed to all terms of the restitution and will honor the restraining order. If there's ever a time when you're open to a conversation, I would welcome it, but I understand if that day never comes. Dad, I read the letter several times, emotions shifting between skepticism, anger, and a complicated grief for the father-daughter relationship I'd never truly had. I shared it with Julia, who viewed it through more experienced eyes. In my years of family law, I've seen many attempts at reconciliation, she said carefully. Some genuine, others tactical. This seems to fall on the more genuine end of the spectrum, but only time will tell if his actions match his words. Do you think people can really change after a lifetime of patterns? I asked. She considered this thoughtfully. I've seen it happen, but it's rare and requires genuine commitment to the difficult work of self-examination. The fact that he's not asking for forgiveness or immediate reconciliation is actually a positive sign. He's acknowledging the damage without expecting it to be instantly repaired. I decided not to respond to the letter immediately. Whatever healing might be possible would require time and evidence of sustained change, not just words on paper. For now, the legal resolution and protective boundaries were enough. The beach house, now fully repaired and secure, gradually began to feel like home again. The rooms that had been invaded and damaged were reclaimed, redesigned in some cases to remove the memory of their occupation. Each change, new paint colors, rearranged furniture, upgraded fixtures, represented another step in taking back my space and my life. At Julia's suggestion, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma and betrayal, working through the complex emotions the ordeal had triggered. The process was painful but necessary, helping me recognize patterns I'd normalized throughout my life and establish healthier boundaries moving forward. Most unexpectedly, I found myself developing genuine friendships with the people who had come to my aid during the crisis. Julia's weekly dinner gatherings became a highlight rather than just a support mechanism. Ryan's security consultations evolved into coffee meetings where we discussed books and music as often as safety measures. Mark and his wife invited me to their anniversary party, introducing me to their extended circle as family, basically. You know, Gerald observed during one of these gatherings, sometimes the worst experiences reveal who your real family is. Looking around at the people who had stood beside me when my blood relatives had tried to destroy me, I understood exactly what he meant. The beach house was mine again, but something even more valuable had emerged from the ordeal. The knowledge that I wasn't truly alone, regardless of what happened with my biological family in the future. One evening, standing on my deck, watching the sunset over the ocean, I realized the fear that had accompanied me home each day had finally dissolved. In its place was something I hadn't expected to find in the aftermath of such betrayal: peace, and the quiet certainty that whatever challenges arose in the future, I had the strength and support to face them. 6 months after the legal proceedings concluded, I stood in my beautifully restored beach house, surrounded by the laughter of friends. The occasion was a housewarming party, or, more accurately, a reclaiming party, as Julia had dubbed it. The home that had briefly become a battleground was now truly mine again, both legally and emotionally. The transformation was striking. Mark's contracting team had not merely repaired the damage, but had helped me reimagine the space entirely. The walls, once marred by crayon and intentional scratches, now displayed serene coastal artwork. The hardwood floors had been refinished to a warmer tone that complemented new furnishings selected to replace those that carried too many negative memories. Even the kitchen had been renovated with new countertops and appliances, erasing all traces of the invasion. "You've created something beautiful here," Gerald commented, joining me by the large windows overlooking the Pacific. "Not just the house, though, that is spectacular, but this community." He gestured to the gathering. Julia deep in conversation with my colleague Ryan, showing Mark's teenage son how to use the professional-grade camera he'd brought to document the event. Neighbors who had rallied around me, mingling with coworkers who had stood by me during the workplace harassment. "I never expected any of this," I admitted. "When Amber first showed up on my doorstep, I felt completely alone." "And now?" Gerald prompted. I smiled, surveying the room filled with people who had become more than friends. Now I understand that family isn't always about blood. The legal consequences of my father and sister's actions had played out much as Julia had predicted. My father, following his health scare, had fully cooperated with authorities. He was serving 3 years probation, attending mandatory counseling, and making monthly restitution payments to all identified victims. The court had granted him temporary guardianship of Amber's children while she completed her sentence. 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation and financial restitution. Derek had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony, but was still serving 9 months for his role in the scheme. According to my father's occasional updates delivered through his attorney in accordance with the restraining order, Derek had entered a substance abuse program in prison and was making progress towards sobriety. The children were the most complicated aspect of the aftermath. Despite everything, they were still my niece and nephews, innocent victims of their parents' choices. After much reflection and consultation with my therapist, I had established limited, supervised contact with them through my father. It wasn't a close relationship, but it left the door open for potential connection in the future when they were old enough to understand the situation more fully. Most surprisingly, my father appeared to be genuinely committed to change. The mandatory therapy sessions had expanded to include family counseling with the children, addressing patterns of manipulation and enabling that had characterized his relationship with Amber. His monthly progress reports, while not required to be shared with me, were forwarded by his attorney at his request, not as an attempt to reconcile, but as proof of his commitment to becoming a better person. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Julia asked, joining Gerald and me by the windows. "You looked a million miles away for a moment there." "Just reflecting on how much has changed," I replied. 6 months ago, I was seriously considering selling this house and moving across the country just to escape the nightmare. "And now you're hosting parties," she noted with a smile. "That's what I call a comeback." The journey hadn't been easy. Even after the legal resolution, I had struggled with anxiety, installing probably more security measures than necessary, and initially jumping at every unexpected sound. Returning to work had been challenging too, facing colleagues who had seen the social media smear campaign and wondering what they believed about me. But with time, therapy, and the unwavering support of my new chosen family, the acute distress had gradually subsided. My career had not only recovered but flourished. The company, perhaps feeling guilty about their initial response to the false allegations, had promoted me to a senior leadership position with expanded responsibilities and a substantial raise. The team I now led had just completed a major project ahead of schedule, earning commendations from the CEO. "Samantha, there's someone here to see you," Ryan called from the doorway, interrupting my reflection. He stepped aside to reveal Patricia, my mother's elderly cousin who had been one of my father and Amber's previous victims. I crossed the room quickly to greet her, taking her frail hands in mine. "Patricia, I didn't know you were coming. How did you get here?" "Your friend Ryan arranged everything," she explained, nodding toward him. "Said it was important for me to see this, to see that standing up to them really did lead to something good." With tears in my eyes, I embraced her. Patricia had been instrumental in building the case, her testimony providing crucial evidence of the pattern of exploitation. Now in her 80s, she had shown remarkable courage in coming forward after years of shame and silence. "We did it together," I told her, leading her to a comfortable seat with a view of the ocean. All of us who refused to let them continue their pattern. As the party continued around us, Patricia shared news of her own healing journey. The restitution payments from my father had helped stabilize her finances, allowing her to move from the nursing home to an assisted living facility with greater independence. She had also connected with other victims, forming their own support network. "We have a weekly lunch meeting now," she said proudly. 6 of us who were taken advantage of by your father and sister over the years. We started out just sharing our stories, but now we're working with a local senior center to develop educational programs about financial exploitation." "That's amazing," I said, genuinely impressed by her resilience. She patted my hand. That's what healing looks like, dear. Taking your pain and using it to help others avoid the same trap. Her words resonated deeply, echoing conversations I'd had with my therapist about finding meaning and purpose in the aftermath of trauma. While I hadn't yet found the right outlet for my experience, I had begun mentoring younger women in my industry, helping them develop the confidence and boundaries I had struggled to establish in my own life. As evening fell, the party moved onto the deck. Mark had installed beautiful string lights that cast a warm glow over the gathering. Someone had brought a guitar, and soft music mingled with conversation and the rhythmic sound of waves breaking on the shore below. Ryan appeared at my side, offering a glass of wine. "Beautiful night," he observed, his gaze lingering on me rather than the ocean view. Our relationship had evolved gradually over the past months, friendship deepening into something more. We had taken things slowly, both aware of the complicated context in which we'd met and the healing I needed to prioritize. But tonight, standing beside him in the home I had fought to keep, surrounded by people who had become my true family, the future seemed full of possibility. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wrapped package from his pocket. "Consider it a housewarming gift." Inside was a custom keychain bearing a simple engraving, "Home is where your story begins." "I thought it was appropriate," he explained. "This house isn't just property you defended, it's where your new story started." Touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the truth of his words, I leaned against his shoulder, watching my friends, my family, enjoying the evening. Julia caught my eye from across the deck and raised her glass in a subtle toast, her smile conveying understanding of the milestone this gathering represented. As the party began to wind down, I found myself once again by the windows, looking out at the moonlight, reflecting on the water. Gerald joined me, his presence comfortable and grounding as always. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when Julia first told me about your situation, I worried we might be too late. So many people in similar circumstances give up because fighting seems harder than surrendering." "I almost did," I admitted. "But you didn't," he reminded me. "And that made all the difference, not just for you, but for Patricia and James and all the others who might have been targeted next. Sometimes standing your ground creates ripples you never anticipated." His words stayed with me long after the last guest had departed, and I was alone in my peaceful home. Sitting on the deck with a final glass of wine, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year, from the shock of Amber's arrival to the nightmare of the occupation, from the betrayal and public humiliation to the legal battle and eventual resolution. The beach house around me was both the same and entirely different. The structure remained, the location unchanged, but the energy within it had transformed. What had been a solitary retreat was now infused with the warmth of community. The walls that had witnessed violation and betrayal now held memories of friendship and celebration. The space I had once defended against invasion had become a gathering place for the family I had found in the midst of chaos. As for my father and sister, I had accepted that our relationships might never be truly repaired. The damage had been too profound, the betrayal too calculated, but the boundaries I had established, legal, emotional, and physical, had created space for my own healing. Whether reconciliation might be possible someday remained an open question, one I could now consider from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. The most powerful realization was how profoundly my definition of family had evolved. For years, I had accepted the narrative that my isolation from my biological family was a personal failure, evidence of my coldness or inability to maintain connections. Now I understood that true family is defined not by obligation or blood, but by respect, support, and mutual care, qualities I had found abundantly in the people who had stood beside me during my darkest days. The ocean waves crashed rhythmically against the shore below, a steady reminder of constancy amid change. My home was secure, my boundaries intact, my heart healing in the company of people who had earned their place in my life. Whatever challenges the future might hold, I would face them not alone but surrounded by the family I had chosen, and who had, remarkably, chosen me in return. I raised my glass to the moonlit horizon, silently toasting new beginnings and the unexpected gifts that can emerge from life's greatest challenges. The beach house that had almost been stolen from me had ultimately given me something far more precious than property: the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, and the certainty that I was no longer alone. What would you do if a family member tried to take advantage of your success? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with relatives who felt entitled to your achievements? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to hear more stories of triumph over family betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find the strength to protect what you've worked for, and the wisdom to surround yourself with people who truly have your best interests at heart.